Hi, my name is Gracie Huck.
I'm Emma Holtzman.
And welcome to our podcast about femininity in Oceania, where we explore the diverse experiences and perspectives of women across the Pacific Islands. From the bustling cities of Australia and New Zealand to the remote villages of Fiji and the French Polynesia, the concept of femininity varies greatly across different cultures and communities.
Through our conversations with Native Australians, we will delve into the various ways femininity is expressed and perceived in Oceania. We will explore the traditional roles of women in society, the impact of globalization on gender roles, and the challenges faced by women in the region today.
Join us as we celebrate the richness and diversity of Oceania's feminine identity and gain a deeper understanding of the unique experiences and struggles of women in this vibrant part of the world.
It is my pleasure to introduce to you our special guest for today's podcast, Siona Dua. Siona is not only a bright young student, but also a natural communicator. Her ability to articulate complex ideas with ease has earned her numerous commendations as a public speaker. We are honored to have Siona in our podcast today and excited to hear her insights on various topics. So without further ado, let's welcome Siona Dua to the show.
Hi, Siona. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
Good, thank you. We would like to begin this podcast by asking you certain questions on feminine gender expression in general and its place in oceanic society.
To start off, what do you consider the difference between sex and gender?
In my opinion, I think that sex refers to more biological characteristics like chromosomes or hormones and reproductive organs that kind of determine male or female anatomy. And then gender, on the other hand, is more of like a social construct that refers to like roles and behaviors and attitudes associated with being either male or female in a particular culture. So I think like sex is very binary, or typically binary, but gender is really a lot more complex and diverse, and it's like on a spectrum.
How is this difference acknowledged in Oceania, in particular Australia?
So I think that like in Australia, there's an increasing recognition of the difference between sex and gender, with efforts to address discrimination and promote equality for people of all genders. The Australian government has taken steps to recognize non-binary genders and to include gender identity as a protected attribute under anti-discrimination laws. And there's also a growing awareness of the importance of using inclusive language and respecting people's gender identities in all aspects of society, including like education, healthcare, workplace, and obviously like in many other countries all around the world, there is still progress to be made in fully understanding and supporting gender diversity.
Thank you for your commentary on the difference between sex and gender and how this is acknowledged in Australia. But how do you think the female identity is perceived in Australia?
I think that Australia is a diverse region that includes many different cultures and traditions. And so the perceptions of female identity can vary widely. However, there's kind of like common themes across the region that either have like a strong emphasis on family and community and respect for traditional gender roles and the importance of like kind of a women's contribution to society. And then in some cultures, women are highly respected as leaders and decision makers. And in others, they still face kind of significant barriers to education and employment that are being worked on to this day. And I think overall, the female identity in Oceania is complex and multifaceted, and it reflects the diversity and the richness of the region's many cultures. But there obviously is still work to do to ensure equality.
Thank you for your amazing answer. How do women in Oceania navigate the intersection of multiple identities, such as ethnicity, class, and gender?
Women in Oceania often navigate the intersection of multiple identities such as ethnicity, class, and gender in complex and diverse ways. They may face unique challenges related to discrimination and marginalization based on their intersecting identities, such as, for example, racism or classism, in addition to gender-based discrimination. However, women in Oceania also draw on strengths and resilience of their communities and cultural traditions to assert their rights and advocate for change. And this can be seen a lot in among the Aboriginal peoples. For example, in Sydney, they recently got the Aboriginal flag to be on top of the Sydney Harbour Bridge alongside the national flag. And so things like that, just working towards change and making it so that people can embrace all aspects of their identity.
Thank you so much. That's such an interesting insight. What efforts are being made to address gender inequality in Oceania, and how effective are they?
So a lot of the efforts to address gender inequality in Oceania include like a range of initiatives focused on improving women's education, health, and economic opportunities. Governments, NGOs, and community groups are working to promote gender equality and eliminate discrimination through policy reform, advocacy, and awareness raising campaigns. These efforts may include programs to increase women's political representation, improve their access to healthcare and family planning, and support women's entrepreneurship and employment. And there's also a growing recognition of the importance of addressing intersecting forms of discrimination, like what we talked about in the previous question.
Thank you. How can we promote a more inclusive and diverse representation of women in Oceania, particularly in the media and politics?
I think to promote a more inclusive and diverse representation of women in Oceania and specifically Australia, it's important to support and amplify the voices of women from a range of backgrounds, including Indigenous women and women from diverse cultural, racial, and socioeconomic backgrounds. I think this can be done through initiatives such as mentorship programs, media training, and support for women's political leadership. And I think it's also crucial to challenge stereotypes and to promote greater understanding of the diversity of women's experiences, identities, and their contributions in both media and political discourse.
How can we work towards creating a more inclusive and diverse representation of women in Oceania, particularly in media and entertainment industries?
Well, I think to create a more inclusive and diverse representation specifically in media and entertainment, similar to above, I think it's important to address systemic barriers to inclusion and representation, such as biases in hiring and casting. And this is very prominent throughout the whole world, not just Oceania, but I think this can be achieved through targeted initiatives such as diversity quotas or inclusive casting and audition processes, and really making sure that you always like the people who are hiring and the people who are the higher ups are always taking that into account and making sure that they are not discriminating on the basis of gender or race or anything like that, because it's really important. And also just it betters a workplace if you have more diverse thought brought from diverse peoples with different backgrounds. And I think it's also essential to challenge harmful stereotypes and promote greater understanding of the diversity of women's experiences and identities through media literacy programs and diverse representation in storytelling.
Thank you so much for all this commentary and insight. Thank you again for coming with us today on our show. We greatly appreciate it.
Gracie and I consider ourselves to be girly girls. We are comfortable expressing this identity with no consequences, as it fits into how women are stereotypically expected to act in Miami. Of course, it is very normal and socially acceptable now to see women dress in things other than pink and skirts, but this is how we choose to express our gender. Also, living in Miami offers us better access to many resources that may not be accessible in all places in Oceania.
Women are vulnerable groups globally, but their vulnerability can increase due to place, especially women who are not born female at birth. In lesser developed nations in Oceania, laws are needed in order to promote equality and lessen the risk for domestic violence. Also, women must gain more access to work, as it is found receiving an income makes them more equal with their male spouses. This contrasts to women's access to work and equality in Australia and New Zealand. Because women in Australia and New Zealand have more access to equal rights and work, they automatically have an advantage over women in non-developed countries when it comes to stable relationships. Stable relationships create a sense of stability, further allowing one to express themselves. If this stability is inaccessible, expression may not be simple.
In Australia, the Sex Discrimination Act makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person because of their gender identity. Also, Fiji has a concept of the third gender, which describes those born male but identify as female. It is expected in many countries to conform gender to one sex assigned at birth. Reggie McGoon is a transgender woman from Fiji and is known as the Queen Mother for the transgender community. McGoon says, "I was one of the first trans people to walk around Suva City in high heels in the daytime. Everyone would look at me and say, 'Oh my God, what are you doing?' And I would say, 'This is my life.' We actually opened the doors for lots of people and they still remember that. We had so much fun. When I went to New Zealand, it sort of broadened my mind. I saw all these trans people walking around in high heels and makeup. When I came back to Fiji, everything was still taboo. So I said, it is no use getting dressed up in makeup only at night. I'm sure we could do this in the day too."
Reggie's story helps us to understand the power of place and gender expression. As she mentioned, being transgender is taboo in Fiji, but in New Zealand is very appreciated and celebrated. Religion isn't power in the majority of countries around the world. It is very common for those who are religious to only find being cisgender acceptable. Due to this, transgender women who would like to express their preferred gender face obstacles for social acceptance. In Fiji, transgender women face violence and limited access to healthcare. In 2011, 40% of transgender women in Fiji said they experienced sexual violence.
But how is the third gender expressed in Fiji? We could look at Namsa Leuba's photography series Illusions, which explores the concept of gender expression and identity through the lens of traditional African masks and costumes. Based in the island of Tahiti in French Polynesia, the series examines how cultural and societal norms shape our understanding of gender and identity, and how these norms can be subverted or challenged through artistic expression. Through her photographs, Leuba questions the limitations that society places on gender expression and identity, and highlights the beauty and complexity of non-binary identities.
By utilizing traditional African masks and costumes, Leuba also draws attention to the often overlooked role that African cultures have played in shaping contemporary understandings of gender and identity. She invites viewers to engage with these cultural traditions and to recognize the diversity and richness of gender expression across different cultures and contexts.
She also utilizes vibrant face paint of pink and blue coloring to really play into the theme of gender expression and take the audience aback. She creates jaw-dropping and interesting pieces of photography that draw people in.
Overall, Illusions is a powerful and thought-provoking exploration of gender expression and identity that challenges viewers to reconsider their own preconceptions and biases. It encourages a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of gender, one that celebrates the diversity of human experience and expression. What can and should be done to act on behalf of this group?
We should promote women's economic empowerment. Women in Oceania often face significant economic challenges, including limited access to resources and opportunities. Efforts should be made to promote women's economic empowerment, such as providing access to credit and financial resources and supporting women entrepreneurs and business owners.
We should encourage participation in politics and decision-making. Women's participation in politics and decision-making is essential for promoting gender equality and empowerment. Governments and organizations can work to increase women's representation in politics and decision-making roles, as well as promote women's leadership skills and opportunities.
We should also celebrate cultural diversity. Oceania is a diverse region with many unique cultural traditions and practices, including those related to gender expression and identity. Efforts should be made to celebrate this diversity and promote understanding and acceptance of different gender expressions and identities.
Overall, feminine gender expression varies based on place and biological sex. In Miami, it is easier to express gender identity as varying identities are more commonly acceptable than in places like Fiji. This is because of the access to resources and education about gender identity in Miami. Miami has been exposed to varying gender identities for longer than Fiji has, decreasing the taboo.
We have also learned that people express their femininity in different ways. They do so through art, clothing, and traditional attire. These carry over nationwide. We would like to thank you for listening to our podcast, and our contact information will be linked on the website if you have any further questions. Thank you for listening.